I had reached the end of the hallway when I heard a loud popping crack sound moments before feeling a sharp sting all across my back. I looked back and saw the holiday devil had whipped me with a whip like a lion tamer would use. I felt the warm ooze onto my back as a new pain started settling in. I started to limp away to safety when I was picked up by the Krampus again. His long, cold fingers wrapped around my back and stung my cuts even worse. He looked at me right in the eye before lifting me behind him and dropping me into the birch basket on his back. On the outside of the basket, it looked like it could only fit a couple of kids. But the inside was massive. I fell into a mountain of bodies. There were hundreds or thousands of kids in that one basket piled on one another, not all alive. Where you couldn't see the other kids which made up the trembling ground, you only saw darkness. No sounds could be heard from inside, or outside really. Kids would scream, mutter, shout until their throats clearly hurt, but no sounds came out of their mouths. Every time I thought the situation couldn't get any worse, it always got worse. I waited what felt like a millennia to escape, as new kids would fall in and join the confusion to show how much time passed. Eventually the Krampus reached into his basket again and began to pull out another child. His arm became larger as he reached into the basket and stretched out to pick up a panicked girl. I grabbed onto her leg and let myself be carried to salvation. When we were pulled out of the basket, I let go of the kid and fell behind the Krampus. He didn't notice I escaped. He was too focused on the girl. He looked at the small girl for a second before biting into her flesh with his large, sharp teeth. I never knew the kid's name before the creature devoured her, but I owe her my life for helping me escape. I backed away slowly from behind the Krampus as he feasted on my fellow child at its dinner table. I had no idea where I was now, but it was dark and it was cold. I think it's where the creature lives. After the monster was finished eating, he picked up a small wooden box, opened the top, and spat something that glowed a bright green into it. He then took the box over to a rusted door that he opened, entered, then left a few minutes later without the box. He then left the room, leaving the child's remains on a large platter, and the rusty door to my curiosity. I opened the door to see dozens of more wooden boxes. I saw many creepy-looking porcelain dolls and other creepy toys. The door behind me closed, and I was immersed in total darkness. I got out my phone and used it to barely light my way. I walked past a jack-in-the-box with a scary face. I walked past a baby doll that looked withered and old. I found a sack doll that looked like a creepy, rotting skeleton too. I thought it was like Santa's rejected toy shop until I found the word Misfits smeared in red paint next to a clown with a skull for a head, blue eyes in its sockets, and big fleshy hands. I was terrified someone else was caught in that room before. When I got closer to the clown, he jumped up towards me and yelled, "Wanna play?" I got really scared and jumped back as the clown let out a scary laugh. I heard scurrying and tiny footsteps of other toys from all around. I started catching the dolls and gingerbread men turning their heads as I ran along the walls trying to relocate the door. I found another message on the wall. "Why can't we die?" It was scratched into the wall by something. I wanted nothing more than for this night to end. When I located the door, I bolted as soon as I saw it, but I was tripped by a toy soldier with realistic burns on half its face. I kicked a tiny hunk of plastic away and moved closer to the door when a deformed baby doll appeared from the darkness and sank her teeth into my leg. I felt a surge of pain and fell to the ground. I furiously punched the doll's head repeatedly until it unlocked its tiny teeth from my flesh. The porcelain atrocity scurried off as other terrible toys danced around me in the darkness. More and more of them kept popping up and coming out of the boxes, like the one the Krampus spat the glowing thing into. The toys began muttering words, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. The muffling got louder and louder until I understood some of their words. "Feel our pain. He killed us, but not entirely." He gobbled me up and spat my soul into a puppet. Kill us. Let us die. The things they said were terribly dreadful, to say the least. I got up and started to make my way to the door as the dolls chanted more obscene things to me. We're gonna eat you alive like he ate us. I'm gonna rip out your eyes. Although they continued to chant, none of them came towards me again as I moved around the dark room. I saw a small toy skeleton in Santa's clothes with a beard move by. A puppet with many nails sticking out of its wooden head was strung up to the ceiling, moving and wrestling with its strings. I spotted a stool that was pulled up to a workbench with tools and a teddy bear on it. The teddy bear had real bear claws sticking from its paws and real human teeth in its mouth. I reasoned that this was the Krampus' demented toy shop and decided to leave before it was too late. I walked past the bench to the door and started pulling on the rusty metal handle. The door was extremely heavy but slowly budged and started opening as I pulled back with all my might. The light began to bathe the room and the misfit toys dashed into the shadows to avoid the light. I ran from the dark room, closed the door behind me, and leaned on it for a while to catch my bearings. I looked around at the only other room in this place that was familiar to me. I went by the long table where the monster ate the nameless girl at, trying not to think about it. Trying to think of something, anything to distract me from the horrors I have bared to witness on this most unsuspecting and happiest time of year. I walked to an open door and poked only half my head out to scan the perimeter of the room. It led to a large room that had various whips, saws, and other torture devices. I snuck in and kept to the wall. I spotted 3 dark wooden doors amongst the darkness and concrete walls. I also found a window, and the snow outside was falling so slowly, so peacefully. 2 doors were on the large wall opposite of the window, and the other was on the wall to the right of the window. I first tried one of the doors on the long wall, but had decided beforehand to go with the door on the right of the window, thinking it would lead me closer to get out of here or something. The walls were lined with racks and racks of hellish masks. Some had horns, some had long serpent tongues sticking out, some had teeth, some had patches of skin, some had antlers. One was a wired skull with antlers, and the antlers had lit candles on them. It was so strange. The room was so large. The other door led to the same room. I left without moving the door in fear that closing the very heavy door would create noise and would lead the creature to me. I walked alongside the wall to avoid the equipment, straight to the only door I had left. I opened the door slowly and with caution. The first thing in the room I noticed was a strange tree that looked like an upside-down purple Christmas tree. The trunk was on its bottom, and the spines and the branches looked upside down. The tree was decorated with red and green lights and small bones. There was another window in this room, but it was on the same side as the last. There was an open doorway that led to a hallway that teed off, and 2 signs labeled the directions. The right one said surveillance room, and the left one said stables. I went to the stables thinking I might be able to find a reindeer to fly out of this place with. It seems like a pretty silly plan now in hindsight. I opened the stable door and awful smells invaded my nostrils immediately. There was frost on the floor as well. There were 8 stables lined up against the wall to the right, each with demonic reindeer sticking out. Below each head was the door to each stall, each with pendants of names on them. I read the names out loud as I started down the row. Each deer was grotesque in their own right. 1 or 2 had exposed skulls. Each had jagged teeth. Some had manes and others had dried blood on their fur. 7 of their eyes glowed red. Slasher, I said as I passed the first one. Wrathful? Gorgon? Putrid? Cyclops. Cyclops was missing 1 fiery eye. rabies. Goner. The last monstrous reindeer looked like a hellish Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. His head held flames that danced from its gnarled snout to the back of its mane. Between its sharpened, bloodied antlers furiously flickered bolts of electricity. Blitzkrieg. I decided riding one of these was out of the question and began searching for the exit. I realized that the only door to the room was the one I came in from. I looked all over the room, looking for some other way out, and saw the reason for the cold. The top crease in the upper part of the wall was missing and led outside. It was far too high to reach. I left the stable room and went into the surveillance room. The handle felt icy cold as I slowly opened the door. The room was large like all the rest. One wall was covered in monitors. The bottom middle monitor stuck out more than the rest and had a keyboard below it. The chair was also pulled up to it. Each screen had various kids on it, some in dreadful conditions, others minding their own personal business. No sound came from the monitors, but I started to notice I was hearing a ticking noise. A clock above the door read 5:45. Christmas Day didn't start at my house until 6 o'clock. The wall opposite of the monitors had names scratched into it. I wondered if the dead girl's name was scratched into the wall. A door that read exit was to the right of the monitors, but the computer said search name. I sat in the large chair and typed Garrett Rockford. A nutcracker that had two bodies attached from the sides of its head popped up. Each body seemed to be trying to yank away from one another. Its face looked like it was in pain, and it had the same color eyes as Levi and Garrett. I looked up Levi Rockford, and the same thing popped up. I sat frozen in awe for a moment. Tears filled in my eyes and ran down my cheeks. The ticking of the clock seemed to turn into clopping as I sobbed. I was crying more than I've ever cried before. I cried so hard I began to hear ringing. Then the chair I was in spun around, and I was face to face with the Krampus. He looked menacing and sinister. His horns were partly covered in blood. His long fingers looked sharp and his eyes burned like never before. He waved his long, sharp, bony fingers at me. "Naughty, naughty," he said cruelly and mockingly. He licked my face with his incredibly long tongue, then began to wrap it around my throat. He started constricting his long tongue and choked me. I was gurgling and coughing and struggling to do close to nothing. I started feeling weaker and weaker. As my head heated up, my lungs screamed for air. My vision even started to become blurry. Then I knew, if I didn't do something quickly, I was going to die. I punched him in the face with all my might and knocked him back for one brief moment, and his tongue recoiled into his mouth. I utilized my time and ran towards the exit. I felt the ground shake directly behind me as heavy hooves shook the floor violently in their wake. I felt the creature's cool breath on the back of my neck. I pushed the door open and ran into the freezing cold as my pursuer followed suit. I ran until I was knee-deep in snow, until a lanky hand gripped me and started dragging me back. The dark snow slowly lit as the sun started to emerge from the bottom of the horizon. The Krampus stopped dragging me. He dropped me and stared briefly at the rising sun. "I'll come get you again," he said as he dropped my leg and retreated into his lair as I lay in the snow. A silhouetted figure came from the distance. I closed my eyes for what felt like seconds, but when I opened my eyes, the sun was higher in the sky, and the figure was closer. I could make out that he was wearing red. Then I passed out again. I opened my eyes to see an outreached hand with a black mitten on. It belonged to a fat, bearded man with a silly hat. "Santa?" I inquired. "Child," he said in a soft, soothing voice. "Let's take you home." The next thing I remember was waking up in my bed at home. Levi and Garrett were kidnapped in the middle of the night. I found out from Rebecca, Brad, and Molly who already told our parents and the cops. I tried to tell them what really happened, but no one believed me. They only got mad when I tried to explain it to them, so I gave up on trying to tell them. That's how I spent my Christmas. Hey guys, it's Evan again. As always, thank you for listening. We always appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoyed part 2 of the Krampus Creepypasta. I really liked it. If you want to see more, things like this, part 1, part 2, continuation kind of videos, let us know. And thanks again for listening.